How's it going, y'all? My name is Aiden Anderson, and this is Candidate Candids. In this series, I'm going out to meet and talk with the candidates in the upcoming Moscow City Council election to better know them and to better understand their platform and how they hope to serve our community. In this interview, I meet with City Council candidate Joe Campbell. Let's get into it. Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well.
I've been asking each of the candidates that I've interviewed this, but with it being just under 4 weeks out from actual election day, how have things been going with the campaign?
It just keeps getting busier and busier. And then with the forums coming up next week, so there'll be 3, so people take a look out at that. You're probably advertising that. Maybe you could advertise that at the end of the video or something. But,
Indeed.
Yeah, but so yeah, it's getting pretty busy. And then I've fallen a little behind in the yard signs, so I'm out there hanging up yard signs and the parade yesterday. But I really have been enjoying it, especially recently. So yeah, I'm excited.
Excellent. Tell me a little bit more about the parade. I know that's an every year occurrence now, and it's a big event. What was it like getting ready for that, being a part of it?
Yeah, you know, my wife, Cindy Barnhart, has a cheerleading team. And so I've been in parades with them holding the banner for Lightning Elite cheerleading. And even the Pullman parade, we do that. I've had a little bit of experience recently. And I was excited yesterday that it just so happens that her team was right in front of where the politicians started or whatever. So I just had to prevent myself from walking with them. But and then we had some friends, cheerleading friends, Shad and his family, 2 daughters who were helping us with the parade, and it was really a great event. Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah, it seems like Moscow is one of those towns that always has a ton of community events going on, parade being one, farmers market being another. The fact that, you have them both happening at the same time and is a wonderful thing. I think you've highlighted some of that in your campaign material, either on your website and that sort of thing, the local event side of things.
Yes, definitely. When I first moved here, I was pretty active with the arts community. And in fact, when I was trying to decide whether to move here or Pullman, because I work in Pullman, I think the arts community in Moscow really was a tipping point. And I have no regrets about that. It's just, it's great. And then the various different kinds of events, farmers market, and then they're going to have the indoor market in November. And there's a lot to do.
And remind me, how long ago was it that you actually moved to Moscow?
26 years approximately.
Okay. And you've been involved with the arts community that whole time?
Well, I've had various, involvements with parts of the arts community. But my wife Cindy is on the Arts Commission now, and I help her with some things on that. I was a DJ at various different times more recently, and yeah, so I've had a variety of different kinds of interactions. I used to go to the art art sales at the Pritchard, when it was the Pritchard. They used to have the art department had some events there selling community art at a bid auction, art auction at the Pritchard. It was an event I used to go to a lot. And just as different, in the last few years, I've been editing a book volume that just came out. It took a lot of time. And so a lot of my community efforts were like with the radio station, just something I could do without too much time commitment, because I have a lot of time commitments.
No, I completely understand. I mean, being a professor, having all of that, the off season is not off season for teachers. Of the teachers that I do know, it's an awful lot of paperwork.
I will tell you the one thing I learned from retirement is just how much time I put in as a teacher. It's just unbelievable. And so, yeah.
And Forgive me, how long have you been retired for?
Just, a few months. I retired, I guess, in May, just this past spring.
So this running for city council, all of the campaigning side of things, it's kind of like you're coming out of retirement a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. And the one great thing about it is I really do want to spend my retirement giving back to the community and trying to help in whatever way that I can. And whether I win or lose, I'm learning a lot about just how many options there are in this community to help.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of different things going on, and I'm learning more and more about them as I campaign. So, so I think it was definitely the right move for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just to give context to our viewers, we're in Moscow's Friendship Square right there, and right across the way I can see the notice board, which is filled with all sorts of those events of people trying to help out and raise awareness, and both in terms of entertainment, education, outreach, and then actual genuine volunteer work that people can be a part of. So there's always something going on.
That's right.
If I might ask, what are the sort of things as you've learned more about how you want to give back to the community and how you want to be able to serve people who, for all intents and purposes, are your neighbors and that sort of thing, what particular either organizations or methods of outreach have you found that you are most attracted to?
Yeah, I recently joined the League of Women's Voters, and they're nonpartisan, but they have a speaker series. So I went to the first meeting, and we were asked to consider volunteering for different committees, and they had a variety, and there's a speaker series there. And when I helped create a philosophy conference, the Inland Northwest Philosophy Conference, and I was the program director of the American Philosophical Association conference. At the time, it was probably the largest English-speaking philosophy conference in the world, actually.
Wow.
So, and I served on the APA committee, program committee, for a number of years. So I have experience with kind of high-level programming, and they have a lot of great ideas already. I really do think information is really important, especially at this time with climate issues. I think trying to get out information to people and effective ways of doing that is the best way to go.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine I would be inclined to agree, because it's often difficult to compel people to action when they don't know what's going on. Should I care about this? How do I care about this? It can seem abrupt and uninvited if they're not actually on board with you, or at least don't know the context of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, and toward the end of my career, I mostly did metaphysics. I worked on free will, but toward the end of my career, I got into political philosophy and political freedom. And I do think that, there's, this is a little lingo-ish, and people don't like the language, but there are negative liberties and there are positive liberties, where negative liberties are like rights. And the trouble with rights, which we all have and which are good, is they still have obligations. And then that's the trick, is how do you get people to pay attention to the obligations? And if they fail, what do you do? So positive rights, on the other hand, that deals with issues of autonomy. So how can you incentivize the public into doing really what is best for the community? Information is one way, but there are other things too.
Mm-hmm. This is actually great, because I was hoping I could get you to unpack a little bit of your philosophy, and now I have an opportunity. Do explain a little bit more what you mean by the difference between positive and negative liberties, was it?
Yeah. Well, so this comes from the work of Isaiah Berlin, which I got interested in. So I think his famous essay, I think, is called Two Concepts of Liberty. And in my slogan, I have community equals diversity plus liberty. And one lesson I've learned from him is that most political problems are really a function of different concepts of freedom and how to negotiate those. that's where the diversity comes in, with the different concepts of liberty. I think a lot of, political conflicts are sort of subject to that kind of analysis. And I do think that the way out is, one way to build respect that you want for negative liberty, respect for rights of others, is through positive incentives. Help people to become better people, I think. And I think better people are just going to want to do better things. I really do believe that. So I think it kind of has a social payback if you enrich the lives of individuals, really how they see fit. Give them opportunities to enrich their own lives, really is what you want to do. I think it will pay back in better citizens, a better democracy. Yeah.
That is fascinating to me. And I think it makes sense out of a lot of the political controversies, if you will, that can arise both in small town politics and in big city national politics. And that can oftentimes be a difficult conversation to resolve because people are expecting it to get resolved at scale, where everyone's on the same page at once. And I think a case can be made that that's not really feasible a lot of the time.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Yeah, not just a lot of the time. Even when you break down into like sub-communities where you have areas of agreement, disagreements will show up. Mm-hmm. There's a positive side that, though, and this is also, gets at the diversity. So I have a friend, Neil Levy, who does some work on theory of knowledge, and because there are a lot of debates that seem unresolvable. Mm-hmm. And so why is that? And if you ask some people, they'll say, well, the other side is just uneducated, or the other side is ignorant.
Right.
But you can actually test these hypotheses, and for almost all the debates, even something like climate control, there are an incredible number of people with PhDs or are on, a bad side of climate control, if you think that's a bad side. But both sides have people with the same level of intelligence, and so that's not it. And I think that, again, the way out is just to try to find some common ground. Don't focus on the differences. Focus on pragmatic, practical needs and what are the best way to accomplish that. And that's something we all have stake in. Mm-hmm. The differences, I think, shouldn't really matter in politics. I think it shouldn't. Hard to get them out, but I do think that that's what we want. We want to go towards, that.
No, yeah. It's an encouraging thing to hear, because I think a lot of people would hear somebody say that they're a philosophy professor and think, oh, well, philosophy is all in the realm of the theoretical, of the ideal. It's about long conversations that take you staying up way too late at night to resolve and figure out, as opposed to city politics, which are very practical, like which sidewalks are going to be fixed on what days and how are we going to pay for this program, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. And so hearing you talk about this as almost a practical philosophy of the sorts of things you would want to implement if you got elected, or just in general, how do you serve your community, is it's encouraging to hear.
Yeah, it's interesting because there was a friend of mine who, early in my career, we were at a conference. It was right after I got my first job, and we were in graduate school together, this friend Patty and I. And she asked me why I was interested in free will. And I gave this answer, which indicated that my interest was really political philosophy. And I really do think it really always was. It's just, I think of it, the history of free will, if you study that, you study the history of contingency, the history of possibility, the history of necessity, and it really does show up. It's amazing, and I didn't realize until the end of my career, when I got into political philosophy and started reading people, is how much that history of our idea of freedom politically comes from various conceptions of individual freedom. So the debates kind of play out in sort of similar ways. But free will is an interesting topic because everybody wants to talk about it, everybody has an opinion about it, but the opinions vary so widely. And everybody's confident their opinion is the right one, and even though they all disagree. But but I do think that some of that gets reflected on the political level, and that's where this idea of diverse points of liberty can really kind of get in the way, but I think just like in philosophy, trying to find those areas of commonality, like what really are we after, what really do we want to accomplish, and trying to focus the goals in a way that appeal to general values that we all share, not the differences among us.
In my conversation with Evan Holmes, he brought up, jokingly, but I think it strikes a note here, is the idea of like, well, there's two things in Moscow that no one can dislike, and that's the farmer's market and pickleball. And it's a great joke, but I think it also highlights some of the stuff that you're saying is like, at this level, we should be able to find some commonalities that we can actually work towards, provide tangible results in, and then the rest of this, well, we can have a conversation about it, sure, but we have to retain our focus if we're going to go anywhere with these other conversations as well.
I think that's exactly right. It's funny because somebody asked me if I was playing pickleball when I told them I was retired. I've never played. I know very little about the game, but maybe, have you ever played?
I have not played. It just looks like, I confess to me, it looks like a very simplified, weird version of tennis that maybe I'm not in the right tax bracket for.
Yeah, I don't know if pickleball is in the future. I used to play handball when I was younger, and then I played racquetball actually on the U of I for.
Okay, so you're in the right tax bracket.
That's
maybe
that
one
might be
of these
right.
days. Maybe one of these days.
Yeah, actually, the hard game is squash, but I digress probably from. But I do think the point that you're making is a great point. Is that there are a lot of areas of commonality for the people in this community. I think nature itself, like part of what brings us here, is a love of nature, a love of the outdoors. Here we're outdoors right now, and again, that's a point that we share in common. I think if we focus on those kinds of things, we would be better off.
Well, just to steer back into the campaign a little bit, you are not the only philosophy-minded guy who's campaigning this time around. I know you guys teach at different schools, but what have your interactions been like with Bryce Blankenship and that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've known Bryce for a long time. I didn't really interact with him too much in philosophy. I knew he was a philosopher. I knew him mostly from various restaurants that he worked at. He was just great, actually, and he was really wonderful to talk to. But toward the end of my career, again, I had like these editing assignments and then this teaching, and so a lot of we used to interact with the U of I back in the day. We had a joint, a series of papers. I think they might have started it up this year, but it had kind of gone out for a while. So I know a lot of the U of I people, maybe not as well as I should, but just as philosophers. But I've known Bryce as a member of the community for quite some time, and I like him quite a lot. Yeah.
And that brings me to another point, which is because you've been a professor at WSU.
Right.
And so there's, the little soft rivalry between WSU, U of I, and also just the companionship because they are so close together as schools and Moscow and Pullman as cities. How would you describe that dynamic, the interplay between the universities within your realm of experience?
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, I think it's changed, maybe not for the best. when I first moved here, they had the Wheatland Express,
Mm-hmm.
which was a bus that ran between campuses. And we encouraged, at least in the philosophy department, uh, University of Idaho students to take classes. I would have University of Idaho students every semester, at least 2 a semester. Um, and it's interesting. I mean, I don't know. I come from somewhat humble beginnings, and there's something about the U of I, something about the Moscow people. There's a sort of level of humility. I'm not sure all the people who originate from Seattle, share. It's just different. It's a different kind of attitude, but we lost that with the bus, and then worse, they stopped encouraging that, and then worse, they started discouraging actually students from other universities sort of partaking in things, and all of this, I guess, is by the way of cost savings of some kind, and there might be things I don't understand about it, but there is a downside, I think, to that, and there's a difference between the two campuses, and I've grown to appreciate them both. I think when you get people that are similar in a lot of respects, but also different in some respects, you should encourage interaction, more interaction. I think that would be a better thing. I'd also like to see a little bit, there's so much going on over at WSU, over at U of I, so many different kinds of events. If you just thought of the music events that the music departments in the 2 universities put on a year, an incredible number, but there's no, as far as I could tell, way of kind of coordinating them together. There isn't one. There's a guy named Paul Bryans who used to work at WSU.
Okay.
He had a website where that's what he did in his retirement. He's since moved over, toward Seattle. I think he lives in one of the islands. But I'd like to look into that. Again, I think getting out information, letting people know what's available, is helpful, important. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think to touch on the getting information out, I know at a city level, when it comes to the individual counselors and their position, they are often strapped for time every single time. They're bringing up all the different possible events you could engage in. And I don't know if that's something you're looking forward to or not when if you win the election this year, but.
Yeah, well, this is what's nice about the campaign is that you can kind of test to see how ready you are, because I've been going to council meetings and committee meetings, frankly, to see if it is something I want to do, and I enjoy it. Obviously I'm going to have to pace myself. I'm interested in transportation, though. There are a few key kind of issues that really interest me where I think I could offer something. So, I think picking my spots, the kinds of way I want to contribute, I'm kind of looking forward to it. I mean, like I said, because especially working on this edited volume, I was a little isolationist in my later years, and I'm looking forward to being a little bit more social, getting out and meeting people. I've enjoyed it so far. So,
this election cycle, as far as I've been following the forums and that sort of thing, there's a definitive theme, if you will, in terms of the issues that the candidates are being asked to address and interact with. Something along the lines of climate issues, water, and the ongoing developments as Moscow draws more and more people to it. And that's sort of the overarching theme that I've seen play out in subtle different ways at a number of the different forum opportunities that have been granted. When it comes to practical steps, I know there's a lot of talk that can say, yes, this is an issue, yes, we can focus on that. When it comes to a practical step, as you're thinking about it, what becomes, in your mind, the immediate priority? Like, let's say you get into office and the first thing on the agenda is something from that set of items. What particular policies are you thinking about, or that you have in mind that you think could be implemented to help advance those issues in a positive way?
Yeah. Well, in terms of concrete policies, I'm not sure I have many at the moment. One thing I've learned actually is just how well run Moscow is. I mean, they pretty much, have dealt with a lot the issues that, or they're dealing with a lot of the issues that need to be dealt with. I mean, one of the concerns of some people are the trees, but this is sort of forward-looking. I mean, one day we're going to have to replace these trees. We don't want to do it all at the same time. That would be impossible. And so maybe figuring out a strategy about that or something. But I do think, I mean, one thing is the housing is just such a serious issue. It needs attention. I certainly don't know of any policies that are going to do that. But I still think it's a way where community forums might help, because here's one thing I know, because I've talked to lots of different people in lower income brackets in Moscow, people in higher income brackets in Moscow. And they all don't like the housing situation. There's not enough choice with respect to it. So when you get enough people like that who are sort of concerned, I think there's a potential to actually, make a difference. But I think first you got to collect the information together and then find out, what to do. There's a lot about this I don't quite understand. But if you look across the United States, across Canada, salaries have kind of maintained a plateau, maybe risen a little bit, whereas housing prices skyrocketed. And it affects everybody in different ways. So we all have a stake in attending to it and not looking away and not saying, oh, well, this is a problem across the country, so what are we going to do about it in Moscow? Well, maybe we can do something about it in Moscow. But I don't know what to do. But yeah.
I can see the community forum thing being incredibly helpful because as I'm sure, as I've seen at city meetings, and I'm sure you've seen because you've been going to the city meetings as well, there's always the chance that a miscommunication will occur between the public, the city, the government that is helping institute new development, and the developers themselves in terms of their plans and their combinations. And somewhere along the line, someone doesn't get a message, and now something's happening that people feel is unexpected or they are unprepared for in terms of, oh, if I had known that this is what they were considering, then maybe I would have spoken up or I would have offered my voice. So I think that the increase in community forums where it's actually bringing a variety of people together on this issue, they might not be able to do anything practical about it in that moment to fix the problem, so to speak, because it's a bigger problem than that.
Right.
But there's always a chance that in talking with each other, they might come up with a potential solution. And then at the very least, they're preventing the problems that miscommunication or a lack of communication can cause, which is just surprise and sort of the rude awakenings that can occur with sudden and abrupt changes in policy or the look of a town or what have you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I'm just filled with with things to say, but I'm really, when I went to the education forum, which I think that they're all great because you really can learn a lot about how well structured the Moscow education system is, how they've got their bases covered in a lot of interesting ways and important ways. And, and the candidates are pretty good at revealing, some of that. But it came out in one of those meetings that Lewiston was able to pass a bond, and the way that a school bond, I don't know if you know about the Lewiston High School, but
Only vaguely, so go ahead.
you should go down and look at it because it looks like, all-star caliber thing. But really, how do you convince people? Well, what they did is they broke it up into little subcommittees and just went around the town in different places. I mean, it interests me because it's a sort of problem about the community, the flow of information in a community. How do you get information across? Like, I know my mother-in-law, Trish Nelson, she was a former teacher, has a lot of former teacher friends, but a lot of them will go to her for advice, say, about who to vote for, something like that. So you get these people, they keep track, and then somehow they get information out to other people. And, hooking into that kind of network, trying to find out what the little sub-communities are and who you could tell that will really get that information out wider. But it is really just, having forums. I'm talking there about something on the scale of, like, if we wanted to have a school bond. I think that's the way to do it, is to break it up and go out there in the public and have people like Jim and Dulcie, who are on the school board now, who really understand just the whole, structure of the Moscow education system, explain the need. And, if it's going to work, that's the way it's going to work.
Yeah. It's the idea of, incremental problem solving that involves a lot of communication, that involves building a lot of trust, and sort of gradually, to use the phrase, digging yourself out of a hole bit by bit. Maybe that's the wrong way to frame the conversation, but I think it is a helpful way to frame the solution, just in terms of, you're going to have to work at it steadily, and it's going to be incremental change. It's not going to happen all at once for some of these problems, but you can actually build a more resilient community structure with those sorts of incremental changes or pieces of communication than you can if you were just a clean sweep. It's like, all right, some changes are going to happen. We're going to, take this building down and replace it with this one. And everybody else is looking around like you've grown 3 heads.
Right. No, I like that, the idea of building a better community structure. I think that's right. And I think with, like, mixing the groups up, not always having all the 1912 building is great. But, just going around, because you draw a certain kind of crowd there probably, but we want to get things out to everybody. But then in each little, next gathering, there were people that were in the one before and some that weren't. And, you get to meet more people. Yeah, I think I got sidetracked when I was talking about my friend, Neil Levy. Part of it is that we, we grow, what is it? Echo chamber. We get into echo chambers. We get surrounded by people that we're used to being around, and it's just the same old complaints. If you mix that up, there's some diversity, some difference of opinion, and getting that kind of difference of opinion, I think, that's when the solutions start. Because if the people in the echo chambers had the solution, they'd be out there implementing it, right? But they don't have the solution. So somehow you got to kind of break that up, get different conversations going.
And that's something I've heard, being a more recent citizen of Moscow, having come to town later than you did, and having friends that have come later than I have, there is that conversation about Moscow being a little bit of a bubble, and that's just sort of the nature of the town to an extent, because it's not very large. There's not a ton of infrastructure between the town and its neighbors, so to speak, and that can lend to, just like the echo chamber effect, being in a bubble. When people come from out of town and, they're excited to join up with what Moscow has to offer, but there are also just some idiosyncrasies that don't make sense unless you've been living in Moscow for a while. And then that's just sort of the way things are. And
it might, and it's interesting because even if there aren't like an echo chamber, there might be appearance of one. And that's worth dealing with right there. I mean, I think, I don't know, most of the people I get to know in Moscow, once you get to know them, they're very open-minded and very diverse. There's just so many different kinds of viewpoints. And sometimes you'll think of somebody, sort of was a hippie or something like that. And you find out things about them that you just might not have imagined. So, and that is one of the, especially now I'm going out and meeting new people. One of the things I really enjoy about Moscow is just that diversity. But there's some really interesting people here. I mean, there are writers, there are artists, there are, well, you're a filmmaker. I mean, it's just, there's a lot going on. A lot of people are doing things out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One thing, just to change gears a little bit, one thing I've always been interested in is, you have all of these people who are in the middle of campaign season right now. And so there's a lot of, like you said, you've got yard signs to put up and you've got forums to attend. But when you're not doing any of that, what do you do for fun? What are your hobbies? What are your, what do you do and your wife do on the side when you've hung up the cape and that sort of thing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my wife and I, we just like hanging around in our house. We got a great view. We live, up on a hill. I could see Moser. You can see Moscow Mountain, and it's so we like hanging out on our porch, even in the cold weather. Got a little fireplace on the porch. So, and I have a lot of interest. Film and music, I think, are the two biggest ones, and mostly like. Lately, especially today, I wanted to relax a little bit, and I just made a mixtape,
Oh.
So I make these mixtapes, and I put them on iTunes. I'm going to try to shift them over to something, Spotify or something like that.
I feel like you should have put this earlier in your campaign, that you were a DJ and you have mixtapes. You could have gotten some really interesting...
Well, and when I did shows, I would always do thematic shows like on freedom or politics or something like that. So I have... so the mixtape I made today is called Election. I'll send you a link to it. But... and I literally listened to it while I kind of beefed it up a little bit today, added some newer stuff, and I listened to it while I'm out there driving around, hanging up signs.
Just sort of gets you in the mood and gets
me in the mood.
Gotcha.
And yeah, so don't take the song literally always, because a lot of times it really just has to do with the beat. It's just sort of upbeat, kind of makes me feel better.
I have friends within my industry who, when they're editing, which I can't do this, by the way, I have to be dialed in, but they'll have their own version of that, some sort of mixtape, where the whole point isn't necessarily the music itself, but to keep them focused and to keep them churning out whatever it is they're making. So totally understand that.
Yeah. And I went to this conference recently, and the hotel was pretty far from where the events were, and I made a mixtape for that I would listen to walking, and it's pretty good.
Excellent. Well, I have come to the end of my list of questions for you. But I want to give you an opportunity to plug your campaign to whoever might be available. If you don't mind speaking to the camera,
sure.
Tell people what you're running for, and where they can find you so that they can get involved in your campaign.
Yeah, I'm Joe Campbell, running for town council, Moscow City Council, and you could reach me via email at joe@voteforjoecampbell.com, and voteforjoecampbell.com is my website as well. So there's some information there, and looking forward to seeing you. If anybody needs a yard sign, contact me, Joe at voteforjoecampbell.com, and I will come and give it. And if you want me to come by and talk, we have a lot of forums this week. I don't know if I'm gonna start this week, but I am gonna meet in coffee shops maybe the week after, Cup of Joe with Joe.
That's great.
So so look forward to that.
Joe, thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Aiden.
And that concludes my conversation with Moscow City Council hopeful Joe Campbell. With this video, you'll find links to his campaign and more for if you want to find out more about his platform, or if you want to get involved in his campaign yourself. We'll have more conversations with candidates coming your way very soon. And as always, if you have any questions, let us know. This is Aiden Anderson with Candidate Candids. See you next time.